and every story can change the world. Together we are Global Speakers Talk.
So one of the best jobs that I've ever had was when I was the director of communications and marketing at a university in my hometown of New Orleans. And I had this great opportunity to hire a social media coordinator. Now, the search had taken about 2 to 3 months. And during that time, I was working social media for the university myself. So we get our new coordinator, she comes on board, and we start having a series of one on one meetings. And every meeting, I'm letting her know about some of the very cool things that I discovered when I was working social media for the university. So one meeting, I tell her about the cool things that I'm doing. Another meeting, I tell her about some of the cool things that I discovered. And then the next meeting, I noticed that she was not necessarily into the one-on-ones. And then the next meeting, I noticed she was still a bit disconnected. And I realized something. I was doing the one thing that I cannot stand for people to do to me. I was micromanaging. And so in the middle of one of our meetings, I just stopped and I asked her, "What do you think?" And she started telling me what she thought. The next meeting, she gave me more information until finally she really owned that position the way I wanted her to. And surprise, surprise, she actually started doing a much better job of social media than I could have ever thought. What I was doing at the time was something that I was pretty aware of and making sure that she owned that job. I was encouraging her to use her expertise authority. Expertise authority is just how it sounds. It is someone exercising their knowledge and their skills and the work that they do almost to a level that no one else can tell them how to do the job. And what I also realized is that if I wanted to be a better leader, then I needed not only to let my team do their jobs, but I needed some feedback from them. And so I did something with my team that they didn't quite expect. During our performance reviews, at the end of the performance reviews, after I had given them feedback about their work, I asked them a question. And that question was, how can I be a better team member to you? And wouldn't you know it, I got some great feedback that made me better at what I did as well. The process of becoming a better leader was with my team's help. And what I was encouraging them to do, I was encouraging them to get into a process called followership. Now, followership is a concept that was developed by a management professor named Robert Kelly in the 80s. And he wrote a book in the early 90s called The Power of Followership. And there were a couple of things that he pointed out in that book that really stand out to me. The first thing is there are simply more followers than leaders in the entire world. You might have seen this number that the world is comprised of about 85% followers, 10% leaders, and 5% of people who may not necessarily get involved in any kind of a process at all. But the other thing that he wrote is this, that the concept of the leader as a hero is somewhat of a myth. And that's because followers have so much power. But let's go ahead and make sure that we understand something here. Followership is following, but following isn't necessarily followership. You see, if you are participating in followership, if you are exercising followership, then you are indeed following. But if you're following, you may not necessarily be as engaged as someone who is exercising followership because you could be a blind follower. And so, followership is that active engagement that someone has with their leader. It's the feedback that they give them, it's the concern that they have for the team success and the organizational success. And learning this helped me realize that I have practiced followership for a pretty long time throughout my career. And I also realized that I have had much more power than I thought. And guess what? So do you. I want to help you get this week started off great. If you're someone who doesn't have, let's say, a very sexy title, or if you're someone who may not have a title at all that has any sort of weight of authority to it, as you go through your workday, as you volunteer for your favorite cause, as you practice your faith, there are ways to ignite your followership so that you can show true, believe it or not, follower power. And the first thing you can do is identify what your follower power is. Let me ask you a question. Are you the type of person who the people who you work with gravitate to you because they like you? Are there people who come to you because they respect your opinion about things? Or maybe you just happen to know so much about the organization where you work, the agency, or maybe where you worship, or maybe you know so much about that cause itself that you are almost an encyclopedia of information about what's happening around there. Or maybe you have this level of education and expertise that just seems to save the day all the time. That makes you a critical part of your organization, a critical part of your community. And what happens is that the leaders know that they really need you because they know that you are so ingrained in what's happening that when they come to you, you are someone who can deliver. But even if you're the person who doesn't necessarily deliver in the way that those leaders want, your followership, your level of knowledge, the way that you are involved, it actually gives you greater opportunities down the line. And even if the opportunities aren't necessarily about you and only you, what you do open yourself up to also would be opportunities to make any organization or any team a great team. The power that you have there isn't necessarily in what you do. The power that you have is in what you understand, what you know, but then also your desire to move the team or the organization forward. The second thing that you can do to get off to a great start this week is to realize that you really don't need a big title to get big results. When I was a director of public relations at another university, I was middle management. I was not on the executive team. So I didn't have a lot of authority. The expectation, quite frankly, would be that the executive team would give me the orders and I would simply carry out the orders. Well, something happened. This university where I was working was included in a state legislative bill to move it from one system to another system and merge it with another university. Effectively, the writing was on the wall that the university would have been shut down. Now, in all of this was some really curious data that was being used to rationalize why the university should be merged with another university. But we found a flaw in that data. And the president of the university had a great idea. We created a press release that exposed the flaw in the data. Now, a nonpartisan organization came to us and they asked us what's going on, but there was a problem. The executive team didn't necessarily want to meet with this nonpartisan organization. And when I went to leadership and asked them about it, they said, we don't necessarily think that is going to do any good. But you see, the PR director in me, the public relations director in me told me that if they didn't really care about us, they would not have asked us any questions whatsoever. And so I saw this as an opportunity. And I made the decision to meet with this nonpartisan organization. We went over the data. They expressed some concern and some confusion about the data being used, and they decided not to back this legislative bill. And because of that, the university was removed from the bill, and the university is still running today. My point in this story is that followership is best done when there's a sense of courage, when there's creativity, and when there is conviction. which takes me to the third thing that you can do to make sure that you get your followership off to a great start this week. And that is recognize that the way that you follow can determine the way that you're going to lead. Because in that particular situation, I knew that if I had my chance to have a team, and if I knew that if I had my chance to work with a group of people, I was going to do things differently than they had been done with me when I was in a follower position. And recognizing that you can be a great leader based on your following is based on a model that Kelly developed and is called the 5 follower types. And what he did in this model is he looked at the level of involvement that people have as followers, and he also looked at the level of critical thinking. So if you're an exemplary follower, you're someone who displays high critical thinking and high involvement. But if you're a passive follower, then you're someone who shows low critical thinking and low involvement. But there's a couple of interesting types of followers in this model, and that's the conformist, someone who actually shows low critical thinking but high involvement. And then there's the alienated follower, which to me is the most interesting one because this person shows high critical thinking and low involvement. And then there's the pragmatist. And the pragmatist is someone who is kind of a mix of all. The pragmatist is the person who basically gets a feel for how the ebbs and flows of the organization are going, and they follow that a little bit. The goal, of course, is to be an exemplary follower. So if you're passive, how can you be exemplary? Well, one way that you can do that, and the most important way, is to understand the skills that the exemplary follower brings to the table. If you're a conformist, how can you be an exemplary follower? You can do that by building confidence in yourself and your opinions and your feedback. And if you're an alienated follower, like I said, the most interesting one is probably a matter of trust. You might be alienated because you did not trust something that the leader did. And so you have to become a positive thinker. You have to build trust in the leader. And then with a pragmatist, to be an exemplary follower, instead of just basically playing the situation for what it is, because most likely you do that out of self preservation, teach everyone else how the system works. If you know how you follow, you can determine how to lead. When I had that opportunity to work with that team that I had, the thing that I loved about it is that I knew that I wanted them to have a follower experience that I had not had. And so I encouraged ideas from them. I saw them for who they were. And I also made as much room as I could for their skills and expertise because I knew that if I could get the best out of them, then the team would benefit handsomely and the organization would benefit handsomely as well. There are many ways that you can invest in your cause, in your company, in your agency, in your nonprofit organization. There are many titles that you could have as well. And each title could be used to invest in yourself. But your power as being a follower comes in those things that people just cannot take away from you. Because when you practice followership, one of the things that you know is that no one can take away your knowledge. No one can take away your expertise. They can't take away your confidence. But most importantly, they cannot take away your dedication and your concern that you have for others so that the team benefits and the organization benefits where you work. My name is Eddie Francis. I'm a communication strategist, and thank you so much.
Together we are Global Speakers Talk.